All right, good morning. Welcome to another edition of the MSL Learn webinar series. So excited to have with us Bryce Maxell, who is the program director for the Montana Natural Heritage Program. And we're excited to be able to bring this opportunity to librarians in particular, because this is the time of year when we're all going outside and we're seeing all kinds of things out there, living things, plants, animals, birds, and one of the ways that I think is really amazing that the State Library and the Natural Heritage Program support citizen scientists is providing that great base resource for knowing what lives in Montana, and also how to get involved. So with that, Bryce is here with us today. I'll be monitoring the chat. We welcome you to ask questions in chat, and to post those in the Q&A too. I'll be monitoring that as we go along. But Bryce is going to share some information, and then we'll have time for a little bit more questioning and questions towards the end of our presentation. So with that, Bryce, I'm turning it over to you.
Thanks, Clay. Today I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the Montana Natural Heritage Program, and I'm going to walk you through two of our websites, the Montana Field Guide and also the Species Snapshot, which is a companion website to the Montana Field Guide. First, I wanted to give you some background on the Montana Natural Heritage Program, i.e. why have one? What do we do? We try to think of, we are based in statute under the state library to manage information on the flora and fauna of Montana. And we're part of a broad network of heritage programs that are across the US and Canada. And all those programs try to do similar things, summarized in this bottom right triangle of this slide. And that is, what are the species? Where are they in their local jurisdictions? And then how are they doing? That is, what is their conservation status? And we do that, how are they doing, both on a global scale and a subnational or state scale. And essentially, you can look at that diagram in the sort of the bottom right there, those G and S statuses, with G5 and S5 being secure, a species or a habitat being secure at the global, meaning the G, or the subnational or state, meaning the S scale, or they could be on the other end of that spectrum, a G1 or an S1, and critically imperiled at either of those scales. Essentially, when the heritage programs were established in the late 1970s, 80s, it was to try to have a common set of information that could be available to all of the states and provinces in Canada, and to inform species and habitat management decisions, make environmental review processes go quickly, make sure that no species become imperiled enough that they need to be listed under the Endangered Species Act. And we try to think of that in our program, that we want to save time and money in moving environmental review, permitting, and planning processes forward in an informed way. And we think we can do both. In terms of the information that we manage, again, I'm going to show you another pyramid here. And at the base of this pyramid is the count of species and habitats that we manage information on. That's 16,538 different species and habitats that we manage information on at this point. We also manage, moving up that pyramid, we manage information on where species or habitats have been surveyed for. We have 400, almost 500,000 of those. Observations of those species, over 5 million. We track polygons of species of concern, where those species of concern are breeding, almost 100,000 of those. We model their predicted habitat suitability of individual species across the state. We have over 1,000 species modeled. We draw range polygons delineating what we think the boundary of the range of the species are in the state, about 3,000 of those. And then we assign those global and state conservation status ranks. We have about 5,000 of those 16,000 that we've assigned conservation status ranks to. Skipped a slide. In terms of what that looks like, just want to show you that we have fairly good coverage across the state with those 5.2 million observations and almost 500,000 surveys. You can see some data holes around tribal reservations. Some of that is due to data sovereignty issues and tribes not wanting to share data. Other reasons for that are just a long history of not giving those tribes resources to survey for species on their reservations. I wanted to also draw your attention to the models in the bottom left, or excuse me, bottom right there. And we basically make these models to show on the landscape, at a landscape scale, what the suitability of the habitat is. And we break that, managers have told us that they really value breaking that into 4 categories. Unsuitable, shown in gray, low suitability, shown in yellow, moderate suitability in orange, and optimal suitability shown in red. And they use those to make their management decisions. We stack up those individual species models, and we've come up with these overall predicted biodiversity maps as well to inform large-scale land management planning efforts. On the left side of this is an image of overall native vertebrate biodiversity, 462 species that we've modeled in this. And the hottest colors, the yellow colors there, are predicted to be high biodiversity areas, and the blue or cooler colors are predicted to be the lower biodiversity areas. And then we can rescale that output. As you can see, we're zooming in here to the Gallatin Valley. Something I want to point out there is these yellow riparian stringers along the rivers, showing how important those are for the biodiversity of the area. On the right side is a cumulative risk of invasion of state-listed noxious weeds, where we've stacked up all of the invasion risk models for individual weed species and looked at cumulative risk statewide. Again, hotter colors indicate higher cumulative risk of invasion by those state-listed noxious weeds. More species are likely to invade. But if you look in the upper right corner, this is a Daniels County area. You'll see that's a very blue area for the state, low risk of invasion, but we can rescale that output for Daniels County in that zoomed image in the bottom right to allow folks in Daniels County, weed control coordinators and whatnot, to have an idea of where they should focus their efforts on. Overall, they're a lower risk for the entire state, but they certainly have higher risk areas within their jurisdiction. We also manage information on habitats. We manage the statewide land cover layer, and also because of the importance of wetland and riparian habitats, we manage to supporting species. We manage a layer that is the National Wetland Inventory and Riparian Mapping layer. We do that in conjunction with some programs at the University of Montana. And then all of that information we aggregate into our standard environmental summary reports, and we can produce these in a matter of just a couple minutes so that we can respond quickly to things like natural disasters, flooding, fire, maybe a train going into the Yellowstone River, something like that. Within just a few minutes, we can make a quick list of species and habitats that might be impacted. And these are designed to be documents of record in any National Environmental Policy Act or Montana Environmental Policy Act process. And these are free to the public. And so we can just generate those based on a mediated request, and they can make that request on our website. I wanted to talk, just kind of give you a feel for the amount of use in the field guide that I'll be going through here. So that's almost 600,000 users in our last fiscal year, 737,000 different sessions, 1.7 million page views. You can see use goes across the US and also around the world. And in terms of hours of use, 22,000 hours plus. That's about 86 hours of use on the average workday. So it gets a lot of use. And now we're going to do website demonstrations on both the field guide and the snapshot, and then we'll take questions after that. So I'll share my screen here. Hopefully you're seeing that. Please let me know if you're not.
Looks great.
All right, great. So this is our homepage for the Montana Natural Heritage Program, and links to the species snapshot and the Montana Field Guide are at the upper center here. We're going to go through the field guide first, and then we'll do the snapshot second. So the field guide, is composed of several different field guides, one for animals, another for plant, another for fungi, which includes lichens, and also what I think folks think of as mushrooms. So we classify those as non-lichenizing fungi, ecological systems, which are habitats, and then invasive and pest species. So in each of these guides, you can drill down into the guide by just clicking on individual sections. So we're going to drill down to vertebrates. I want to note as we're drilling down that there's a little PDF symbol here above the groups. And wherever that shows up, you can download a custom, or not a custom, but a list of all of the species within that portion of the guide. Also on the right side of the guide here, you could download a guide that is a PDF guide that you could use on your smartphone, your tablet, your computer as you're traveling if you don't have internet access. And you could download guides for mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians. That will be all of them in the state for all of these various groups. So sometimes those files can be fairly large. So beware of that anyway. Let's keep drilling down. We'll drill down to an amphibian here. And then I want to note, as we drill down farther, there's this view images that is available, and that helps people identify species. So if we click on that view image, you'll see a photo panel of all of the different amphibian species in the state that will help you quickly identify, hopefully more quickly identify what you're seeing. And you can click on individual images there to take you to those species accounts. We'll keep drilling down with salamanders here, do the mole salamanders, and we'll do a western tiger salamander. Every species account in the field guide has various photos of the species. And what we've tried to do is capture, we're a series of adult photos, larval photo. We're trying to capture all the life history stages here of these species. There's an egg photo. We also link to spatial information on our Map Viewer web application, where you can see distributional information. You could Google for more images of this same species with those links, understand more about its status, a description of the various life history stages, what are the diagnostic characters of the species, the range in Montana. This is distributional information that we make freely available on the website to everyone. And by making it available in this generalized manner, we're not sharing any information about what species are on individual properties or things like that. But this generally answers most people's questions about the distribution of individual species. These charts show when observations have been reported to us, what time of year they've been made and reported to us, and also what years. And so I want to make sure that I'm emphasizing this is what has been reported to us. It does not mean it's a trend of the species. So when you see this submitted observations by year and you see they go up and back down, there was a lot of inventory work being done in these years, so a lot of focal effort, and that has nothing to do with the trend of those species. There's an elevational profile of observations, i.e. what elevations are the observations coming in from. And if you click on any one of those charts, you'll get more detail and potentially a tabular listing of what time or how many records there were in each individual month. Migration information, habitat information. We crosswalk individual species with habitats that they might occur in. And then if we click on those, any of those, that'll take us over to our environmental systems, ecological systems field guide. And so here you have a guide for different habitat types across Montana and where they occur and what species they're composed of. We'll go back to tiger salamander here. And food habits, ecology, reproductive characteristics, management. And then also it's a gateway to information, literature that we've cited in the account, additional references that we have in our databases. And you can see that's a pretty extensive list there for this species anyway. And then web searches, where if you click on Google Scholar, WorldCat, or Google Books or science.gov, it will preload the scientific name of this species into those searches. So again, this can be a great gateway to general searches for information on these species. So, so that is an example of looking at an individual species account, and we'll go back up, and I wanted to take you through our habitats, which are ecological systems, and just say that we have around 70 or so individual ecological systems in Montana, and we can drill down in those and look at the various types of forested systems. And again, those accounts are very similar to the species accounts. There's a photo, general description of where that system occurs and at what sort of precipitation and elevational gradients they occur. What are the dominant species? What are the dynamic processes like flooding, fire, and grazing that are important to maintaining that habitat, management of those habitats? And then we do provide a crosswalk to, at least at this point in time, vertebrate species that occur in those ecological systems. And so we could then link back to individual accounts there for those species and see where they occur. I want to take you back on the field guide page here to one other field guide, and that is our invasive and pest species guide. These are broken down into aquatic invasive species, noxious weeds, forest pests, agricultural pests, non-native species in general. That's the entire list. And then also biocontrol species there that might be used to control some of the noxious weeds. In every case, again, you can download PDFs of those and view images to help find those species. And then if we click on, for instance, noxious weeds, we can see which of those are priority 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, which is those are going from greatest concern of invasion to lower concern of invasion. And then there are county listed noxious weeds here as well. In each case, let's click on Beaverhead County, for example. You could download, again, that field guide for Beaverhead County for county listed noxious weeds. You could download a field guide of those and use on a local tablet, for instance. And again, that view images option is also available there. I wanted to make sure also that I showed you searching. So we could search for frog, and anything with frog in its name will come up. That's in the name of the common name of the species, though. So we might want to click on one, and then, for instance, we might want to go to order frogs Anura and click on that to see that full list of frogs, because some of them might not have frog in their name. Plain spadefoot is an example of a frog toad that does not have the word frog in its name. Fox, just as another example there. And then I wanted to show you on the advanced search, you can search for, users can search for different taxonomic groups. They could look for different status on that G1 and S1 scale that I talked about earlier. You could look at lists of species by forest or BLM status. And at the bottom of this is really what I wanted to show you. People could create their own custom field guides. So you could say custom guide in that. You would have to go look up the scientific names of these species. So that might take you a little bit of work, but you could go ahead and create your own guide. Let's look at what I got. Oh,
I definitely need that map of domestic feral cats.
Well, apparently I don't know the scientific name of mountain lion here. Um, I've just created so two there, and then I'm going to go ahead and download that. And I just want to let you take a look at that so that, again, if you wanted to create a custom guide for two species that you're interested in, we've got an account here for striped skunk that summarizes, it's not the entire online field guide account, but it is a very quick summary of a few of those fields and the range map, the distributional map, and that time of or the months where those observations have been reported. And there's usually a 1 to 2 pager for each species in those custom guides. So with that, I want to take you, we're going to go back to the main field guide here. And then I'm going to go over to our species snapshot site, which is linked at the top right of the main field guide, species snapshot here. And we'll take you through that. And the species snapshot site, you can create your own custom field guides for individual areas. And so these would be species that are documented in specific areas. So one common way what we've done is we pre-intersected all of our data with all of these different jurisdictional boundaries. You could do House district, Senate district, watersheds, tribal boundaries. FWP region hunting district might be a popular one for people who want some field guides on their smartphone or tablet while they're out hunting. Guides for 10 miles around an individual town. For an example here today, I'm going to just click on county and we'll stick with Beaverhead since it's right at the top of the list there. And then we'll say, well, I want a list of all of the mammals in Beaverhead County. And if I wanted to do multiples of those, I could hold down my control button and I want a list of mammals and reptiles. I'll turn that one off just for size of the guide here. And then I could say I want species of concern, but I could do that for Forest Service sensitive species, or I could do that for BLM sensitive species. All these different status types as well. But we'll stick with Montana species of concern, and I'll submit that. So we have 18 mammal species of concern in Beaverhead County, and I can explore that list of species and open those individually up and look at how many observations are in Beaverhead County. I could view a predicted habitat suitability model. I could link over to the full field guide account, or one of the main values of this website is, again, I've created this custom list of species that are mammal species of concern. I could download that to an Excel file. I could download that list, or I could also download a custom field guide. So if I download the custom field guide here, open that up, my query criteria are listed on the first page of that guide. And then there's a 1-pager for each species that met the 1 to 1.5 pager for each species that met that criteria. Again, a photo, range map, distributional information, the time of year that the observations are reported, generally describing the species and what their diagnostic characteristics are, and describing that the habitats that they occur in. And so just in a matter of seconds there, we created a 23-page long guide that you can easily download. So that is a quick and dirty summary of the Montana Field Guide and also our species snapshot website. And I'd be happy to take questions if you've got any.
There was one question.
Yeah.
Will there ever be an app for this kind of information to be more readily on the go?
Yeah, we apps take more resources than the Montana State Library has to put this information together in terms of maintenance. But one thing I will tell you that we are working on is a revised version of the Montana Field Guide that will be much more mobile compatible. So look for that in the coming year. I think it may be a full year out, but it's hopefully sometime between now and this time next year. And there's going to be some really neat things going on with that. We are going to spatially enable it so that you could essentially maybe check a box to say, I want to see a list of all the species that occur within a 10-mile radius of me, that are documented within a 10-mile radius of me. And that will help you maybe identify that orange flower that you're seeing in your local area. Another thing that we're doing, that we've already established characteristics for individual species, where we've gone through and taken all the plants and we've said, is this a tree? Is it a shrub? Is it a grass? Is it a forb? And we've said, what color is the flower? How many petals does the flower have on it? Those sorts of things. And so you'll be able to query those out on the advanced search of the new field guide. So I think that will help people identify the species that they're seeing as well. We'll also probably link to iNaturalist a little bit more than we are now. And iNaturalist has some great artificial intelligence tools to identify photos. And so that's one thing that we want to make sure we're providing people. And we do, I forget exactly when we have that scheduled, Colette, but we have we'll be doing a presentation on iNaturalist at a future one of these Learn webinar series.
Yeah, we're scheduled for July 30th for that. So definitely check back in with us for that. So another question is, where does the information come from? Who is responsible for updating? So like, who takes the pictures? Who does the observations? Like, where does the information come from?
Information comes from any credible source that we can find. A lot of times that would be university or agency researchers in Montana and also outside of Montana. We do make use of citizen science data where we've got photos to back up the identifications that people are making. Some of the great photos on the field guide have just been donated to us by some amazingly talented photographers. But the bottom line is we have staff in place that within the state library here to ensure that all of that data is highly credible.
I'm just imagining how many fifth graders or eighth graders really could benefit and hopefully have benefited from the ability to create those custom reports. That just is an amazing feature and makes this type of information really accessible too.
Yeah, we know that from our Google Analytics searches, you can track what are the common search items, and we know that people are using it for their kids are using it for their homework. For sure. So, but I would say it's still an underutilized resource in the state. Like, we know that a lot of people know about it and use it, but I think a lot more people, if they knew about it, would be using it. So if you can help us get the word out, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I was even thinking that using some of the pages from those custom reports or any of those PDFs could be a poster in and of itself to just direct people in libraries, post that with the link to the field guide and the species snapshot, and those people who walk in and maybe who are visitors or tourists can see that they can get answers to those questions that they might have about the animals and the plants and things that they're seeing. I'm gonna just kind of walk really quickly through. We'll be doing a recording of this session that will be posted to our YouTube channel here very shortly. We always appreciate your feedback, and I'll put this link in the chat as well. But if you wouldn't mind filling out our short survey to help us know how we've done and give us some ideas about the value of this information for you. We have a bunch more coming up. We have Montana Historic Newspapers coming up next week. The second in our series about connecting with local government. We have a website chat. And then in June, we're going to kind of go back to some library catalog and Montana Shared Catalog learning. So check out that Aspen calendar for those sorts of things coming up. If you have any questions about this, you can reach out to Bryce, certainly, but also anything having to do with continuing education or these programs, you're more than welcome to connect with me. I'm going to say thank you so much to Bryce for your time and what we've learned this morning, and just really appreciate everybody joining us today.
Very welcome. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good one.